All right, let's dive in. Today we're looking at a blueprint for our economies that challenges pretty much everything we've been taught about global trade. It asks us to look not across the oceans for prosperity, but right in our own backyards. And it all starts with a very simple but really profound idea.
Namaskar. So today, we're going to explore a blueprint for self-sufficiency, a philosophy that argues our immediate environment holds the key to our prosperity. And our starting point is a question I bet you weren't expecting.
Just think about that for a second. Does the climate where you live, the humidity, the heat, the rain, influence not just what you eat or wear, but the entire character and economic drive of your community? Well, the theory we're exploring today argues it absolutely does. Okay, so let's start right there. This is our first section. Because before we can even think about rebuilding an economy, we've got to understand the invisible ways our environment is already shaping us.
So this gets into something called the east-west theory. The source we're looking at suggests that folks in hot, humid climates, say like Assam in the east, tend to be, well, less physically active than people in hot, dry climates like Punjab in the west. Now look, this isn't a judgment, not at all. It's an observation, right? It's about how our environment shapes our societies from the ground up. And it's such a powerful metaphor because if we ignore these basic local conditions, any economic plans we make are pretty much doomed to fail. It really sets the stage for why a one-size-fits-all model just doesn't cut it.
So what happens when these local conditions aren't just ignored, but are actively plundered by outside forces? Well, that brings us to the core diagnosis of the problem, a legacy that has shaped centuries of history. The source material gives us this really unique definition of economic exploitation. See, it's not just about stealing profits or money. It's the total plunder of a community. We're talking its physical work, its mental energy, and its natural resources. It's a much more holistic view of how a community can be completely drained of its life force.
And this exploitation, it's not just one thing. It actually evolves. The source points to three distinct forms. First, you've got colonial exploitation. That's all about capturing a market's raw materials. Then, it morphs into imperialist exploitation, which uses political muscle to keep that economic drain going. And finally, there's fascist exploitation, which adds a layer of cultural oppression on top to justify the whole rotten system. And to see how this devastating cycle plays out in the real world, we've got to look at the history of Bengal.
And this slide, wow, it shows the relentless multi-generational cycle of this stuff. This wasn't just a single event. It started about 400 years ago with Mughal imperialism draining the region's resources. Then, bam, after the Battle of Plassey in 1757, British colonial exploitation ramps up, and they systematically destroy local industries, like the world-famous textile trade. And this wasn't just some economic downturn, it was catastrophic. By 1770, it was a major factor in a famine that killed an estimated 10 million people. The system then just kept evolving, you know? In 1793, they put in new feudal orders. And even after partition in 1947, the source argues that the fundamental pattern of draining local wealth, it just continued under new management.
So here's the bottom line, the crucial point. The result of all this multi-generational exploitation is a completely shattered economy. Local industries that once thrived? Gone. Skilled workers forced off their land, their livelihoods destroyed. And a deep, systemic cycle of poverty got locked into place. This is the problem that the theory we're digging into today wants to solve.
Which brings us, finally, to the solution. After diagnosing the illness, what's the cure? Well, this next section introduces a pretty radical, local-first principle for economic health and real self-sufficiency.
And this quote right here just nails the core idea. Industries which are based on imported raw materials are always weak industries, sick industries. I mean, just think about that. If your entire economy depends on materials from halfway across the world, you are always vulnerable. It's a sick industry, just like the author says. A truly healthy economy has to be built on what you have right there in your own backyard. So what does healthy planning actually look like? Well, it boils down to four key principles. First, plan for what people actually need. Pretty simple, right? Second, you have to understand your local environment, the soil, the climate, the whole deal. Third, and I find this part fascinating, respect the sentimental legacy of the people. We're talking about their unique culture, their traditions, their history, and finally, the golden rule, prioritize local raw materials, period.
Okay, so let's see how this would work in the real world. The source gives us a detailed plan for the region of Bihar, breaking it down into these self-reliant socio-economic units. So you look at a place like Mithila, with its rich soil that's just perfect for growing fruit, or Nagpuri, which has all these mineral deposits. See? Each region builds its economy on its own unique strengths, instead of just trying to copy some generic model from somewhere else. This is what decentralized planning looks like in action.
All right, so all of this leads to the final, and maybe the most visionary piece of the puzzle. How do you actually do this on the ground? The answer is something called a master unit. Master units, they're envisioned as the nerve centers of society. That's a great way to put it. They are self-sufficient local hubs that are designed to meet the fundamental needs of the people and raise everyone's standard of living right from the ground up. They're basically the engine of this new local economy.
And every single master unit is built on 5 essential pillars, and these are designed to guarantee the basic dignities of life. We're talking about providing food from local agriculture, clothing from local fibers, education through local schools, healthcare from local medical units, and housing for those who need it most. It's all sourced and managed locally, for the community, by the community.
Now, the ultimate goal here isn't to create a bunch of isolated little islands. Not at all. It's to create a global network of these strong, vibrant, self-sufficient communities. Because think about it. By making each locality resilient and prosperous, you remove the very possibility of the large-scale exploitation we talked about earlier. You solve the problem at its root.
And as we start to wrap this up, the source leaves us with this message of really profound optimism. It's a reminder that, yeah, despite centuries of exploitation, progress is irreversible. Why? Because the ultimate solution lies right here, in our own enlightened thinking and compassion.
So I'm going to leave you with this question to chew on. In a world that's just obsessed with globalization and scaling up, what if the true path to a just and sustainable future isn't about thinking bigger, but about thinking local?
Hey, if you found this breakdown valuable, please do subscribe to the channel and give this explainer a like. It really helps us continue to break down these big, complex ideas. Thanks so much for watching.